Just be continuing the series of Job that I've been doing. We'll be looking at Job chapter 7 today. Read that. It says, "Is there not an appointed time to man upon earth? Are not his days also like the days of an hireling? And a servant earnestly desireth the shadow, and his hireling looketh as an hireling looketh for the reward of his work. So I am made this month of vanity, and wearisome nights are upon me. When I lie down, I say, when shall I rise? And the night be gone, and I am full of tossing to and from to the dawning of the day. My flesh is clothed with worms out of dust, my skin is broken and be loathsome. My days are swifter than a weaver's shuttle, and are spent without hope. I remember that my life is wind, mine eyes shall no more see good. The eye of him that hath seen me shall see no more. The eyes are upon me, and I am not. As the cloud consumed and vanished away, so he that goeth down to the grave shall come up no more. He shall return no more to his house, neither shall his place know him any more. Therefore I will not refrain my mouth. I will speak in the anguish of my spirit. I will complain in the bitterness of my soul. Am I a sea or a whale? Thou settest a watch over me. When I say my bed shall keep me, my couch shall ease my complaint. Then thou scarest me with dreams, and terrifiest me through visions, so that my soul chooseth strangling and death rather than my life. I loathe it, I would not live away. Let me alone, for my days are vanity. What is man that thou shouldest magnify him, and that thou shouldest set thine heart upon him, and that thou shouldest visit him every morning, and try him every moment? How long wilt thou not depart from me, nor let me alone till I swallow down my soul? I have sinned. What shall I do unto thee? O thou preserver of men, why hast thou set me as a mark against thee, so that I have a burden to myself? And why dost thou pardon my transgression, and take away mine iniquity? For now I shall sleep in the dust, and thou shalt seek me in the morning, but I shall not." Let's pray. Father, we thank you for just the opportunity we have just to gather our word tonight, Lord, and I ask that you would just have your hand upon me as I preach, Lord, and that you would just speak through me and use me, Lord, and Lord, I ask you would just use your blessing in Jesus' name. Amen. I've been going through Job. Gotten to chapter 7, so we're doing pretty well. So in chapters 1 and 2, I'll just give a quick overview. So chapters 1 and 2, we're sort of given the setting for the story there. And Job was a man who, worshipped God, and he shunned evil. He was wealthy. He was well spoken. And was well spoken by all. And then Satan comes. He accuses Job of worshipping God for his own personal gain. And basically, Satan has said, if God took away the blessings of his wealth, his family, that Job would turn away from God. We know that God, in confidence, agrees to allow Satan to take away Job's wealth and family and health. And by chapter 3, poverty has replaced Job's wealth, and self replaced his wisdom. A terrible disease has robbed his health, and death has basically become his welcome. We know that as Job's friends seek to help him, that they find him speechless with how bad he has become, with the position that he's in. And for 7 days they are quiet and just mourn with him. And then Job pours out his helplessness and his self-pity. And instead of being an encouragement, his friends united to condemn with a condemning response. They attack him. By the name of Eliphaz is the first to speak. And in the beginning of his discourse, he's been quite sharp with Job. And Job's basically have accused him of complaining about his predicament. He starts in chapter 6 with a rebuttal against what Eliphaz is saying, and that's what we saw last time I was up here. He starts off just defending the position he's in, and then it seems like he gets weighed down by the grief and the calamity that he's in, and then he turns to his friends and he reproves them for the betrayal of their attitude. And it's almost like he's gotten so worked up with the emotions that he's let his friends have it. So he's unloaded on them in the half of chapter 6, and then chapter 7 sees him go back to what he was talking about in the start of chapter 6, describing a bit more detail on the situation that he's in, and then he sees himself turn and direct his speech towards God in the second half of the chapter. And so we see in the first half of the chapter, Job starts to describe the state of man and the state that he in, and the pain that he was in. This is what he, as I said, this is what he was doing the first part of the pre-chapter as well. Job is then going to direct some speech or direct his attention towards God in the second part of the chapter. So he starts off this chapter in the first 5 verses. We see Job start to describe the futility of man. So he says, "Is there no appointed time to man upon earth? Are not his days also like the days of a hireling? As a servant earnestly desires a shadow, as a hireling looketh for a reward of his work. So am I made to possess months of vanity, and wearisome nights are appointed to me. When I lie down, I say, when shall I arise, and the night be gone? And I am full of tossing to and fro unto the dawning of the day. My flesh is clothed with worms and clods of dust. My heart is broken. I'm loathsome." You know, he begins by describing how wretched life is. You know, is there not appointed time to man upon the earth? He says, you know, a length of time for every man. He likens himself to a hireling, a man hired to perform a task and then allowed to leave. The previous chapter has expressed his desire to be taken or to die. You know, Job longed for death at this point in his life. He has asked God to shorten his life. You know, Job has already suffered great hardship with his family, his possessions, and then his friends have come and they've put him down, they've attacked him. So Job is just seeking for this to be shortened. He says in verse 2, he gives the example of the end of life that he longs for. The servant's desiring shade. And there's a servant that seeks the day, the break from his labour, the hireling his reward for the day's work. Once again, using these examples, the work being over and the rest, the reward that can be enjoyed from it. In Job's life, this moment is a wretched state. His friends have not helped his troubles, they have increased them. And all he wants is for God to end his troubles and let him be in peace. Verse 3 of Job continues his describing his suffering. See, Job speaks about the futility of life here. It says in verse 3 that he has been made to endure months of vanity. This is not vanity in the sense of being excessively prideful, but it more gives the sense of being in misery or worthlessness. He has suffered. And this hasn't been a short time. This has been a long time that he has been suffering. Now, Job is stuck in this position where he is in constant misery. Even his nights are disturbed, he tells us. When his sleep is overtaken, he's in a constant state of pain and suffering. Verse 4 tells us that he finds no comfort in the rest of his bed. He says, when I lie down, I say, when shall I arise and the night be gone? I am full of tossing to and fro unto the dawning of the day. You know, it must be such a pain that not only that be a pain for him that even in the day when he suffers during the day and when he takes rest at night, that he cannot find rest, that he's just full of tossing and turning. It's that feeling that you get when you've been you're tired, you're worn out, your body is just it aches, and you long for the bed, you long to sleep, to rest, to allow your body to heal, and instead he cannot find rest. He cannot sleep. He feels as the night goes on forever. He's in tremendous pain. He finds no solace in the night. In verse 5, Job describes the physical condition that he's in. Flesh is clothed with worms and clods of dust. My skin is broken and become loathsome. In the previous chapters, Job described that as Satan touched him, when Satan comes to God and requests that he be allowed to take Job's health, we know that Job is struck down with boils. These seem like they've really gotten worse. He describes his physical position. He's in pain and turmoil. Some commentators suggest that where he refers to the worms, that it is possible that these have become so infected they're full of like maggots and stuff like that. So these boils is entirely possible. So on top of everything else, that these boils and stuff have probably become putrid. Job, in the first 5 verses here, as he was doing in the start of the previous chapter, is really describing the pain of life and suffering that he's going through, and the justification for his longing for it to be short. As he goes through in verses 6, he begins to describe the shortness of life. He says, my days are swifter than a weaver's shuttle and are spent with. I remember that my life is wind, mine eye shall no more see good. The eye of him that hath seen me shall see no more. Thine eyes are upon me, and I am not. As a cloud is consumed and vanished away, so he that goeth down to the grave shall come up no more. He shall return no more to his house, neither shall his place know him any more. He starts to use the illustration, firstly, of a weaver's shuttle, which I had no idea of what it was when I first read that. Turns out it's a piece of wood about this big. But I really didn't understand what he's talking about. I started looking around, and I think what he's describing is if you've ever seen someone do weaving and they're really good at it, it actually moves really, really quickly back and forth. And I think he's trying to get at is the swiftness. As he says, is this the days swifter than the weaver's shuttle. He's describing the speed in which it slides across the weave or the loom. And Job is using the swiftness of an example of how fast life can be, and without hope that it is so bad that so bad where his trials are, so entirely has his comforts been removed that Job could have no prospect of enjoying his future. He lives without hope. He begins to compare his life to the wind in verse 7, sorry. Remember my life is wind, mine eye shall see no more good. In times by life is compared to a vapor or breath. Job's language here denotes that it is frail or soon to pass, as a breeze blows upon someone and passes by. He says, mine eyes shall no more see good. The idea is that if cut off, he would not return again to behold the pleasant scenes of his life. Now he's seen his life fall apart before him, and he sees nothing good now. The sense here is that Job's life would end, and that no longer be permitted to gaze upon that which was once that which he enjoyed. It would just be the end, where the wearisome that he's in, the wearies that he's in. He continues in verse 8. It says, thine eye of him that hath seen me shall see no more. Thine eyes are upon me, and I am not. Continues on Job's idea that off completely removed from the world. The eye of him that hath seen me shall see no more. Job in death will be cut off from all that know him, and Job sees himself as being no more. Now, Job expects to die. He's already implored the Lord to take it from him, or take his life from him, The sense of it is that Job would soon be removed from this place that he dwelt, and that even those that sought him would no longer find him. In verses 9, Job uses a similar illustration to what he used in verse 7. As the cloud is consumed, so that he goeth down to the grave, shall come up no more. He used the picture of the cloud to illustrate the shortness of his life, and even the darkest of clouds eventually fades away. And a man who's lowered down into the grave will never walk upon this earth again. The closing of this section, he says, he shall return no more to his house, neither shall his place know him anymore. He's implying like he's not going to see his family. Job is dwelling on the tragedy of the death. He knows that when he is gone, there'll be no coming back. And Job has already had nearly everything taken from him. He has lost most of his health. He has lost all his possessions and is surrounded by friends who, instead of comforting him, are being judgmental and destructive. He has out his soul and is ready to be taken instead of continuing his current. From verses 11 through to the end of the chapter, he changes the focus of his speech. He seems to now direct his speech towards heaven and towards God. It says, therefore, I will not refrain my mouth. I will speak in the anguish of my spirit. I will complain in the bitterness of my soul. So in verses 11 and 16, we start to see him vent his complaint to God. And then in verses 17 to 21, he seems to request a reprieve of the suffering that that has taken him. So he starts the section basically saying that because of what I've just said, I'm not going to refrain my mouth. He's going to say what he has to say. Now Job is going to almost indulge himself in his complaining. Such is the distress and aspect of dying that Job finds himself in that he cannot but express. Job has already pointed out in the previous chapter that even nature teaches animals to complain when they suffer. So he's going to do that. Job says at the end of verse 11, I will speak in the anguish of my spirit. I will complain in the bitterness of my soul. And this describes the extreme and ongoing and bitter suffering that Job is in. Job now begins his complaint which seems wholly directed towards God. He says in verse 12, am I see well that thou settest a watch over me? These words make up the first cry towards heaven that Job makes. Job seems to use an illustration of the sea and the well, of the illustration of the sea and the well, size his feelings and how he's being treated. Now, Job does not have the strength of the sea nor the strength of the creature of the deep, and he wonders why the man in his position should be tormented so. This is why he cries out to heaven. And Job continues on verse 13 and 14, describing the visions that haunt him each night. He says, 13, 14, when I say, my bed shall comfort me, my couch shall ease my complaint, then thou scarest me with dreams and terrify me through visions. Job's already said earlier in this chapter that able to sleep, he tosses and turns. Now he explains this a little bit more. He lay down to seek some comfort, as well as we all would if we were in such tremendous pain. He seeks the rest that only could bring, and the relief of that. No comfort can be found for him. He concluded that by laying down upon his couch and falling asleep would give him some ease for his mind, that his body would at least free of some type of pain. But instead, he is tormented. He says, thou scarest me and terrifies me through visions. He seems to regard God as the source of this sorrow. It must be something terrible for a man to literally be afraid to go to sleep, even in the position that he is in. Earlier, as I said, that he is unable to sleep. And we know why he tosses and turns, because he's going through these tormented by dreams and visions. It's entirely possible that these are in fact from Satan. Well, we know God has allowed him or permitted to touch Job and affect his health in many ways. When it's not told here who's responsible for these, but we know Job to blame or to imply that God has something to do. But we know that was when Job is worn and he's weary, that he's roused and alarmed by those appealing images that are coming. Continue describing the effect of this in verse 15, saying that my soul is strangling and death rather than my life. We already know that Job has made a request to God to allow him to leave this earth, to take him away from the suffering that he is in. The word strangling can be translated suffocating, referring to either of two possibilities, either alluding to the oppression of breath caused by the nightmares that he's going through, in which you wake up so stressed by something you've dreamed that you literally can't breathe. Or it could be that Job would prefer even this type of death over the life that he is now leading. Job was suffering in body and soul, his flesh wasting away, his body was covered in ulcers, and his mind harassed with fears. He had no peace day or night, and he very well preferred death to the condition that he was currently in. He finishes by his complaint by saying in verse 16, I loathe it, I live alway, let me alone, for my days are thee. Job literally loathes his life as it is now. It has become a burden, and Job desires to part with it, to go down to the grave. Let me alone, he says. Now Job pleads with God to cease the affliction that is now upon him, believing himself unworthy to be in the notice of God. Yeah. Okay, I'm missing something. In the last few verses of the chapter Job, in this chapter of Job, he will request God a reprieve of his suffering. Now he asked the question of God in verse 17. I'll just read the whole thing. It says from 17 to the 30th chapter, what is man that thou shouldest magnify him, thou shouldest set thine upon him, that thou shouldest visit him every morning and try him every moment? How long wilt thou not depart from me, nor let me alone till I swallow down my spittle? I have sinned, I do unto thee, O thou preserver of men. Why hast thou set me against thee, so that I am a burden to myself? And why not pardon my transgression and take away mine iniquity? For now I sleep in the dust, and thou shalt seek me in the morning, but I shall not be. He asked the question of God, what is man that thou shouldest magnify him, that thou shouldest set thine heart upon him? To magnify him is to make him great, or regard him as of so great importance as to fix their eyes attentively upon him, or to set thine heart upon him. Basic idea is that Job is considering himself almost unworthy of the time and attention that is being spent upon him, or that God is spending on such a creature as himself. Continues on in verse 18, Job asks, it seems, why God should take pleasure in visiting him with suffering each returning day. He asked with anxiety in verse 9 how long this was going to continue. How long is his suffering going to last? Verse 9 says, how long wilt thou not depart from me, nor let I swallow down my spittle? Says, let me alone until I swallow down my... This means he's basically means to give him time to take a breath. Job finishes off chapter seeking as to why God is still visiting this punishment upon him. They have sinned, and what shall I do unto thee, O thou preserver of men? Why hast thou set me as a mark against thee, so that I am a burden to myself? The first part of verse 20 could also read, suppose that I have sinned. Job is not so much confessing to sin, but acknowledging that he may have sinned. And if he has, he asks, why hast thou set me as a mark against thee, so that I am a burden to myself? That is, why has God been his target of attack? Surely his sin is not so great. The attack has driven Job to become a burden upon himself, as though the afflictions that are now upon him are squeezed like a grape press. And why, he says in verse 21, "So not pardon my transgression and take away mine iniquity." Job wonders that if he has sinned, why won't God forgive him and remove the burden that is now upon him? He feels that if he has sinned, which he's almost ready to admit to the possibility of, if he has sinned, which he's ready to admit as possible, though he has certainly no deep conviction of sin, at any rate, he has not sinned greatly. And therefore, he cannot understand why he has not been forgiven. Now, believing God to be a God of mercy, he regards him also, and it appears to him accountable that pardon has not been extended to himself. Like his so-called comforters, he makes this mistake of supposing that all his afflictions are a sign of God's displeasure in his life and intended to crush and destroy him. For now shall I sleep in the dust. Now is it too late for pardon to avail anything? Death is nigh at hand, he thinks. The final blow must soon be struck. And thou shalt seek me in the morning, but I shall not be, he says. The idea seems to be that God will relent at last, seek to alleviate Job's suffering. He will search urgently, but I shall have ceased to be. Job tells me that he will not survive this encounter. Now, Job's comments show that he thought he was going to die. He wanted death to come faster. Although he did not know the reason for his affliction, it was incurable. He wanted the peace of mind of forgiveness so that he could die with more comfort. Job has suffered a great deal in this chapter, and indeed the entire book so far. And unfortunately for him, it's not over yet. One of his other friends is about to open his mouth to speak, and will continue to speak in much the same sense that Eliphaz has already. But the good news is that Job will come through it.